Hi, folks. This is Harold Ree with the Paw Print Animal Rescue Podcast. Don't forget, we're giving away one signed copy of Rescuing Penny Jane, the latest book by Amy Sutherland. You have to write us a review on either our iTunes or our Stitcher pages. You will qualify for a chance to win our one signed copy. Make sure to do so by Sunday, March 12th, 2017. Thanks, and on to the show. This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 106. Today's episode is a special presentation of Amy Sutherland reading from Rescuing Penny Jane, her latest book. She happened to be here in the beautiful San Francisco Ferry Building, which on weekends is probably the most crowded part of San Francisco. Beautiful shops and stores. And right in the middle is a small and terrific bookstore called Book Passage. They sponsor a wide variety of readings, and over this past weekend, we got a chance to meet and hear from Amy Sutherland. Now, if you haven't listened to our last episode, she is the author of Rescuing Penny Jane, her latest book. Before that, she wrote What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage. And before that, another book called Kicked, Bitten, and Scratched. Well, we'll just get right to it. You will hear from Cheryl McKeon of the Book Passage Bookstore, Sherry Franklin of Muttville Senior Dog Rescue, the sponsor of Amy's talk, and then finally, Amy Sutherland herself. If you want to learn more about today's episode, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/106. That's the number 106.
This is your official welcome to Book Passage here in the Ferry Building, and we are always pleased to see a nice crowd here at any time. We like to think that we are a community of readers and writers and booksellers, and this is our home base for all of us. This is where we come together. So while you're coming in and supporting us throughout the year, we can be here and have events like this. Every event is special, of course. Every author is unique. But it's really fun when we have co-sponsors, members of our community besides the bookstore, who are here in celebration of an author. So I'd like to introduce Sherry Franklin, who is here from Muttville. Already you're getting a response over here. And Sherry and I are both going to say a few words then about our featured author today, Amy Sutherland. So please join me in welcoming Sherry. Thank you.
Don't you love the smell of a bookstore?
Yeah.
I've forgotten how good it smells. Seriously. Just love breathing it in. I just want to say that I love Amy, and her book is amazing. And what I love about it is it touches me as a rescue person. But I think more than that is that it's accessible to all people that, have compassion or empathy in their life, and it does more than just make me cry or laugh or whatever. It actually shines a bright light on what it's like to rescue animals, and I think that most of us are here today because that's something we believe in. And she does such an excellent job of touching that. So, Cheryl, you want to come up and do a little introduction yourself? Anyway, thank you guys for coming out today. I see some faces that I know, too. Come on up, Cheryl. You're going to do an introduction now. We were fighting over who was going to introduce.
And what I neglected to say is this is not Muttville's first appearance here at Book Passage.
No.
We've had several. Well, one that I can think of for sure, which was my old dog. We had a lot of old dogs here that evening, and it was lots of fun. So we really do feel like this is kind of a reunion here. Well, I was telling Amy that I was particularly excited. There are lots of reasons, but I just discovered that we're both from Ohio, and when you're on the West Coast, it's exciting to find a soulmate. But my first image of Rescuing Penny Jane was a couple of months ago when I first got the book. And I just can't stop looking at the cover, which I know you all will do when you get your own. And then I read the reviews. And in the book-selling world, there are certain people who have real cred. One of them is Garth Stein, who wrote The Art of Racing in the Rain. And there are lots, but another is John Katz, who of course has written all the books about Bedlam Farm. He wrote a deer book about donkeys. He is a true true animal lover and communicates that very well. And both of them had glowing things to say about rescuing Penny Jane. So between the cover and the reviews, I couldn't wait to dive in, and it truly is a magical book. If you're a dog lover, or if you're a person who appreciates an homage to the goodness of life and trying to do good things, you will enjoy it. But she's come around a roundabout way to this book. Amy, first, being a Midwesterner, wrote about food. And she wrote Cook-Off, Recipe Fever in America, about competitive cooking. And that was her first book. And then she left the kitchens of America and came to California, completely switched gears, and wrote Kicked, Bitten, and Scratched, based upon experiences at a school for exotic animal trainers. And then she gained even more renown by being published in the New York Times. And that was for an essay, which was also a book, What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage. And being a contributor to the Modern Love column in the New York Times is no small feat. And we congratulate her for that. It's very exciting. That was back in 2008. Then she's been busy writing for other periodicals, and eventually came around to rescuing Penny Jane, which obviously is very near and dear to her heart because her two housemates are in this book, Penny Jane and Walter. She writes for the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Smithsonian, and more. And I would like to invite you to join me in welcoming Amy Sutherland to Book Passage. Thank you.
And there's water food. There's a Muttville. I see a Muttville dog. Right there.
Right there? Right
Yes.
here?
Sachi, turn around. Star of the show. No,
What is this dog's name?
Sachi.
Sachi? And what's Sachi's story in 30 seconds?
I found her on the street.
All right, okay. That's a pretty good, that's like, if anybody's heard of sudden fiction where you write something in one line, she just did it. She
Oh, wait, I have one more thing to
contest.
say. She's almost 13 and she has a 2-year-old boyfriend.
Good. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate people coming out for my reading, and it sounds like we got a lot of people here from the rescue world. I'm not going to point them out, but there is somebody here who doesn't have a pet. And I just wonder, is there anybody else who doesn't have a dog or cat?
I can't have one at home.
Well, Sherry would like to talk to you about that. Oh, yeah. Somebody else? Well, yeah, all right. So see Sherry afterwards. Just wanted to point out she can help you with that omission in your life. Now, the funny thing is that, as Cheryl said, it sort of seems like I made a big left turn when I went from my first book about the world of cook-offs and then towards the exotic animal training and to this book, and that's probably right, but it has felt very inevitable once it happened. Let's put it that way. It's one of those things where you're on a path and maybe you didn't realize you were on it until you're at sort of the apex, when you reach the top, and all of a sudden you think, oh yeah, this makes total sense that I would end up here. So anyhow, this book is not a memoir. Well, it is a memoir, but it isn't a memoir, which is one of the many reasons it was hard to write. And it's a very personal story, and it has a lot of my own stories in it. But unlike other dog memoirs, classic dog memoirs, I was never trying to get over anything with my dogs. I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict, I'm happily married, I was happily employed. My husband has accused me of being pathologically friendly, but I just say that's what happens in Ohio when you grow up there. So my point is, I was never trying to get over anything, and I was leading a happy life. But I didn't have a dog, and I had grown up with them, and it was always sort of a gap in my life. And so finally, my husband and I were in a situation where we could get a dog, and we, as I talk about in the book, we got an Australian Shepherd. At the time, I was sort of so clueless about the rescue world. This is about oh my God, it's almost like 20 years ago now, that it didn't dawn on me. I had my heart set on getting an Australian Shepherd, and it never dawned on me that I might be able to rescue one. It just, I thought I had to go to a breeder. So I've committed the worst crime. I went to a breeder, but I got this gorgeous Australian Shepherd. And the thing about and we named her Dixie Lou. Her full name was Dixie Lou Devil Dog, to give you a sense of what this dog was like. Almost from the second we got Dixie, I felt that my life not only became happier, but it became much richer and far more interesting than it had been before. And it improved in all these ways I hadn't ever really considered that would result from having a dog. I was outside more, I met more people, and I lost 8 pounds from throwing a Frisbee 24 hours a day. So when I was at the newspaper, I had thought about walking shelter dogs. That had always been kind of on my to-do list, but I could never seem to carve out the time or give it the, sort of really make a point of doing it. And then 9/11 happened, and I don't know if that had this effect on you, but it had, I thought, sort of a national effect on people to realize, like, time is short, time to get busy and do what you want to do with your life. So it inspired me to sign up finally and get off the stick. I also had a much more flexible schedule at that point. I had left the newspaper to work on my first book, which was the one about the cook-offs. So finally I signed up. And I look back now, and that's where the path started. It started out very innocently. I was just going to exercise dogs once a week on Friday morning, but when I picked up that first leash, I had started off on a quest without having any idea that that's what I was doing. And that quest eventually leads here. Who knows where it's going to lead next, but so far that's what we know. Like a lot of you who work in the rescue world are probably well aware, this is really a historic time for dogs in this country. Americans have more dogs, like estimates between 70 and 80 million, that they've ever had before in the history of pet keeping. There are more adoptions via rescue than there ever have been before. Like, Sherry, am I right, about 30% by some estimates? So that's a historic high. And as you all know, rescue dog almost has the cachet of a pure breed at this point. Just say, people don't even try to say what their dog is. They say, oh, he's a rescue, right? So St. Bernard, rescue, almost. So it would seem like a ripe time to find all these dogs' homes, right? Everything's pointing in the right direction. So the question, though, is how? Now, you notice I didn't say it's not something we can't do. We can do it. It's not like a moon launch. We have sort of the basic knowledge of how this might be done. Not that it would necessarily be easy, but we know the various ways, and that's what I wanted to find in this book. That's what I set out to find is the answer to how this could happen, this thing that should happen. And I answered that as best I could by telling stories. I did that because I didn't want to write like a scientific treatise or investigative report. I wanted to write something that would really engage people and sort of bring them up to date on what the rescue world is, because I think most people's ideas are pretty out of date. Sometimes it's old, it's out of date of like 30 years ago, when they went to a shelter as a kid. And I wanted people to, my theory, especially as a journalist who believes in true news, I might add, is that the more informed somebody is, the better understanding they have of an issue or a world, the more likely they are to be engaged in it, right? And that's what we need in the rescue world, is more people, the broader public, the broader numbers of dog owners engaged. So that's where I'm a big believer in the power of stories, obviously, or I wouldn't be a writer. So I really looked for stories, and I really let primarily the dogs tell their stories in this book. So, and I had dogs from all different kind of walks of life telling their stories. So I ended up using dogs from my family's history. I sort of didn't see that in the beginning, but that emerged as I wrote. So I told the story, for example, of my grandparents' dog, this dog that was named, he was famous in our family because of his name alone. It's Timothy Doleful. You know, what a name. So Timothy Doleful was famous because when my grandfather used to come home, this serious businessman type, Timothy Doleful would be so overcome with joy that he would start running in these concentric circles in the front yard, and they would get bigger, bigger, bigger until bam, right into the side of the house he would go, just in a fit of joy, knock himself half out. So my grandmother used to tell this story, and we love this. And as I was writing about pit bull mixes, which back in my grandparents' time, like the 30s, up until the 30s, 40s, people in the United States called pit bull mixes bulldogs, and they were really common. And I realized that Timothy was a bulldog, what we would call a pit bull mix. So my family had one of these dogs in their generations. I told stories of the various shelter dogs that I worked with as a volunteer. Stories like about the dog named Greg. It doesn't crack anybody up. A dog named Greg. That was our shelter staff comes up with some real doozy names, I have to say. And Greg was one of them. And he came in as like this really bone-thin stray that had to be. He was so skittish. He had been trapped to bring him in, and he was just scared out of his wits. And I was the first volunteer to bring him out. And as other volunteers might know, sometimes that creates a real bond for the dog with you. And it did with me and Greg. And he started out as this really shy, scared dog, and he became the biggest, jumpy, mouthy maniac I've ever handled in my life. He's the only one that's ever ripped my watch off. He stretched one sweater about the sleeve was about a foot longer after he grabbed it and ran. I had a down coat that's covered in patches, all Greg's work. I mean, and I was just bananas over this dog, no matter how much he trashed my wardrobe. I told stories about dogs around the country, dogs I met at Muttville, dogs in Minnesota. Where else did I go? Los Angeles, all kinds of places. Yeah, thank you. One of the ones that sticks in my mind is this dog named Alfred in Minneapolis. He was in a shelter, and he was about the size of a Wookiee. He was just ginormous, and when he put his paws up on his kennel door, he was looking you right in the face. And the problem with Alfred, he's like one of these classic dogs. Good-natured dog, actually got along with other dogs, but he liked jumping on people. He never met somebody he didn't want to jump on. And so it became this issue of trying to find a home for him with somebody who could handle that. I also told a lot of stories from the dogs of just American history, and there are dogs just woven through this country's history. And one of my favorites was Stubby, who's the only war dog to get a rank in the army. He was named Sergeant, and he was a World War I dog. He went with the infantry. I guess would you say a troop? He was with a troop in the trenches of France, and he alarmed them when he smelled gas in the trenches, so they knew to put their gas mask on. He caught a German spy in the trenches. He would go out onto the field and sit by injured soldiers and bark. So he was a real hero. He eventually, when he came home, he made it through the war. I think what I have here, he was in 17 battles. And he, after the war, met with both President Coolidge and then later President Harding before he died at the age of 9. Now, and you should know that you can go see Stubby because Stubby is stuffed, and he's in the Smithsonian's Museum of American History on the second floor. So I went to see Stubby, and as I write in the book, I was looking at Stubby, and I was feeling really all kind of emotional looking at this stuffed dog in this case with all this other World War I memorabilia, and he just looked so, I don't know, meaningful in there. And this, I know, you can see why I have the sickness, the dog sickness. This family runs up behind me and presses in around me, and they're all yelling and shrieking, and the dad barks, "Look at that scary dog!" And I just yelled, "It's Stubby!" So they quickly left. I also told a lot of stories about my own dogs, Dixie Lou in the start of the book, and then I tell a lot of stories about my two rescues, Penny Jane and Walter Joe, neither of whom were easy rescues. And so I'm going to read you a section about Walter Joe, but I got to tell you a little bit of setup here. So we had fostered a dog who was a German Shepherd mix, pardon me, named Brody, and he was this big goofy dog. When we tried to put our underwear on in the morning, he would grab it out of our hands and run around the condo. As I printed stuff I had written out of my printer, he would take the sheets of paper right out of the printer and dance around. He was just a super character. My friend here, Elise, remembers Brody. We were berserk over him. We were so berserk over Brody that we went and looked at a house to buy to maybe keep Brody. Anyhow, we sort of got control of ourselves. And we got control of ourselves because he was just not a great match with our Penny Jane is a kind of she's very shy and demure, and he was like having the worst teenage brother in the house possible for her. And it just wasn't fair to her. So we took him back. We were just heartsick over this. It was our first foster, and as anybody who's fostered, I think the first one must be the worst one to go back, right? So the next foster that I was asked to take is this little dog named Walter. He was just named Walter then. And I was asked if I would take him because when he came into the shelter, he'd come from a hoarding case. It was probably a very chaotic situation because he came in with a group of 16 dogs, and he could not be handled. Let's just put it that way. He was trying to bite everybody, and he was growling, and he was really losing his mind. And as you'll tell in this section, he did go home for a foster, and then I was asked to be the next foster to see how he would do changing houses and how he would do as far as being in a city. Because we're in Boston, right? So we need dogs that can get along with a lot of activity on the street. So anyhow, I had never wanted a Jack Russell. I thought they were insane. At the time, I had this thing about small dogs. I apologized to all small dog owners. I thought I was not a small dog person. I didn't even particularly want a male dog because a lot of the males I had known spotted all the time, so you couldn't get anywhere when you walked them. So I thought, oh my God, he's the perfect foster. I'll be able to give him back in a hot second. So I said, yeah, bring him, even though I wouldn't be able to touch him in my own house. So he was still, very, he was a troubled dog when we brought him home, and he could not be handled at all. And so he wore a leash in the house at all times, and he spent his nights in a crate. We could get him in the crate because he was very food driven. And then the minute he came out of the crate in the morning, he jumped on top of his crate, which was next to the dryer. We just happened to put it there. And then he jumped up on the dryer. And that is where he stayed as long as he could, as he lived on the dryer. When I called my mother to tell her about him, she said, would you explain to me again why he's on the dryer? So that's where this section starts out with Walty on the dryer. Is this gonna, I don't want it to go flying off. I pull steadily on Walter's leash to get him off the dryer. It's noon. Time to go out, though he doesn't see it that way. He digs in his white feet, raises his rounded haunches, and lowers his little anvil of a head. This tug of war we have several times a day is something like reeling in a fish on a hook. I hear my father's voice in my head, coaching me long ago on how to land what turned out to be a raging catfish. Slow, steady, I hear him say in my ear. There is something fish-like about Walter, with his long, stout body and pointy muzzle. I have quickly learned that the trick is to increase the pressure on his leash ever so slowly until he gives up and drops lightly to the floor. But Walter is not inclined to give up easily at anything. I make a point of not generalizing about breeds, but terriers want what they want, and Walter doesn't want to come off his perch on the dryer. I crouch some to shift my angle. I tighten my grip. Slow, steady. His collar pushes up against his black ears, crowds his face into a scowl. Suddenly, the leash goes slack in my hand. Walter's collar has popped off. A victor at last, he takes his seat on the dryer, his sanctuary, triumphant but wary of my next move. I swear softly to myself so as not to frighten him. Now I have a dog I can't handle loose in my condo. I do not dare try to put his collar back on. Penny Jane, who's watched this whole curious scene, looks at me to say, as if to say, now what? I email the only person in the world who can touch Walter, the vet behaviorist who fostered him. The vet behaviorist emails back that she can stop by our condo on her way home from work. As house calls go, this should be an easy one. Is Sheila here? I don't see Sheila, right? Okay. Sheila Darpino was the first in the country to complete a one-of-a-kind program. A 3-year postgraduate combined study of shelter medicine and animal behavior at the University of California, Davis's well-regarded veterinary school. She had wanted to be a veterinarian since she was a child, but once the California native became one, she found it wasn't enough. With so many shelter dogs euthanized for their behavior, Sheila believed to truly help these animals, she had to treat their minds as well as their bodies. At UC Davis, she became the equivalent of a psychiatrist. She studied shelter dog behavior and learned how to treat their problems with training, or in some cases with drugs. The biggest lesson she learned in the end, however, was philosophical. Every dog is an individual. There is no one kind of fearful dog, for example. Behind the crouches and tail tucks, a unique personality exists. That's a long way from the thinking of the 17th century French philosopher René Descartes, which stymied our understanding of animals for more than 3 centuries and still holds sway in some quarters. Descartes argued that animals were not only soulless, but lacked any kind of reasoning. They had no more intelligence or interior life, he believed, than that of a well-oiled clock. He called animals beast machines. Even in the 17th century, many pet owners must have disagreed. Now canines are the darlings of the scientific cognition world, and every dog is an individual has become the buzz phrase of the shelter world. It is, however, one of those simple proclamations that are easy to agree with, but surprisingly difficult to apply, especially in an institutional setting where labels and generalities come easily. It is especially hard to apply to growling, biting dogs such as Walter, who are often dubbed inherently bad or dangerous and are put down as a public service as one would shoot a marauding grizzly bear. Granted, a dog such as Walter, who behaved like a terrier from hell his first day at the Animal Rescue League, poses a practical problem. If no one could handle him, there was no safe way to keep him in the shelter. Luckily, a veterinarian with special training and an enlightened outlook happened to work for the shelter just then. Even more luckily, Sheila had a yard and an enclosure where Walter would, she hoped, calm down. Only then would she see who this dog was behind the flashing teeth and growling, if he was in fact a dangerous dog or one who snapped when he was scared out of his wits. Slowly, she got some answers. Once Walter moved into her house, he kept his distance for about a month. Then he began to follow Sheila around. He would playfully run around on his short, squat legs, mouth open in a smile, long, narrow tongue flapping. Then he climbed into her lap. When Walter sees Sheila, he leaps off the dryer and runs to her. When she sits cross-legged on our hallway floor, he plops into her lap. He puts his front paws on her chest so he can look into her eyes while she strokes his back. His glassy eyes brighten. He doesn't flinch when she clicks on his collar. We glimpse who a happy, relaxed Walter might be. I sink to the hallway floor next to Sheila, hoping that some of her charm will wear off on me. After about 10 minutes of chit-chatting with Scott and me while she pets Walter, she has to go home to her family and her multiple dogs. I hold Walter's reattached leash so he won't follow his only friend in the world as she leaves. Sorry, Walter, I say as I close the door. The night returns to normal, kind of. I have to pull Walter down our front steps in the chill of a wintry evening to go for an overdue walk. He shivers as we head up and down the icy sidewalks. I wish I could put a jacket on him, but I can't. Back inside, he hurries down our long hallway to the safety and warmth of the dryer. Then, for some reason, maybe because we're tired, Scott and I do something we never do. We lie down on the floor to watch TV. Not long after we've stretched out on our sides and arranged throw pillows just so, we notice Walter's small silhouette in the hallway. He pads tentatively towards us and then stops. He lets his head droop. Look, we whisper at each other, meaning look out of the corner of your eye. Walter takes a few more steps towards us. When he has almost reached the living room's light, he pauses again. He seems to be thinking. Maybe he's thinking he'll have to make do with the two knuckleheads on the floor. Maybe he's thinking about the nice massage he just got from his only friend in the world. A look of resolve comes over his pointed face. He suddenly races at Scott and snuggles up against my husband's chest. We quietly raise our eyebrows at each other. Walter slept with us from that night on, often putting his head on our pillows or worming his ways under the blankets. He hopped into our laps whenever we sat down. He began to play, dashing up and down our long hallway while we yelled, "Man dog, man dog!" Walter was so crazy to ride in the car that we had to spell the word to each other. Otherwise, he'd bolt for the front door and start squeaking pathetically. He shadowed me. He even sat in the bathroom while I took a shower. He also followed Penny Jane, who in her own aloof way seemed to like him. Eventually, we could take the terrier's leash off and put it on, and then his collar. He did nip me once as I tried to brush road salt off a back foot. I knew I shouldn't have, but he was limping. Luckily, I had a thick glove on and he only bruised my hand. He had become a pet dog again, though one whose feet you'd best leave alone. We sent him back to the shelter with a good report card. Loving, housebroken, funny. The dog who'd once been a gnashing mongoose clearly had a future as a family pet. Yet almost the moment the kennel door closed behind him, his eyes went black and glassy again. He growled at staffers when they looked into his kennel. For fear he would nip someone, only Sheila or I took him out. When he saw either of us, he exploded with happiness. When we left, he shut back down. I got word that the shelter was thinking of putting him down. How could they put a dog up for adoption whom they couldn't handle? I had never wanted a terrier. especially a Jack Russell, I had never wanted a male dog or a little dog. Kurt here and I were talking about failed fosters, and that's what Walter Joe did to me. He made me a failure. I had never been called one before. But it's one of the weirdest terms in the shelter world is that when you adopt your foster dog, that they call you a failed foster. How's that right? So that's the story of Walter Joe, and so there's lots of stories in this book, and there's also lots of answers. But I just want to say that I think that if I had to say just one answer, the simple answer, is that we just need a lot more people involved, however they can be involved. And that, I hope people walk away with a sense that there's just a lot of ways to be engaged in the shelter world. You don't have to volunteer. You don't have to, rescue a gnashing mongoose such as I did. There's all kinds of organizations you can be involved with. You can do spay and neuter. You can work on legislation. So the list is endless, but we need more people engaged, and we can solve this problem, right? I don't know about you, but right in this current sort of political climate, I'm really up for solving a problem that everybody can agree on, right? So anyhow, I'd take any questions.
My dog, the one here, has horrible separation anxiety. It's just totally changed my life for the better and for the worse.
Yeah.
Any solution, as I say, she's almost 13 now, so it might be late in the game, but it hasn't gotten any better.
Well, this is why I wish Sheila was here, because she would have the best answer. But, honestly, if it makes you feel any better, that's a really complicated problem, so you probably are aware of that, but, I think as problems go, if it's stretching you to your limits, you have every reason to feel that way, I think. There's all different kinds of schools of thought. Have you had any luck with crating while you're gone?
Well, she wouldn't anywhere stay in a crate than you would. Oh, right. She when I got a crate, she bloodied her paws.
Right. Right. I gotta say, this is a constant learning experience for me, not just working with dogs, period. But I used to think that the crate was the magical answer, and I have since found out that that's not the case, because we had a dog come through the Animal Rescue League. He was one of the coolest looking dogs I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know how to describe him, but he just really looked like he should be in the movies. And when he went home, he had terrible separation anxiety to the point where they have to put him in a double crate. They have to put him in a plastic crate and a metal crate. At least that took them a while to figure that out. So I'm sorry, I'm not giving you an answer because it's so complicated, but, and I'm sure you've talked with trainers about it too, right? Yeah. Sorry.
I have answers.
Too.
Later. She has answers.
Oh yeah, what am I thinking? Okay, yeah, talk to Sherry afterwards.
Which dog is which on the cover?
Well, I'm sorry to tell you that these are all model dogs. The dogs in the book are the dogs. You see that, and the way it works is that there's a dog at the beginning of each.
Great.
So that's Brody. That was our first foster. I hope my husband doesn't start crying, because that's the one we just loved him. And this is Harmony. This was like Miss Scaredy Pants, and she was scared of everybody except me, which meant that she jumped all over me every time I went into the kennel with her. And she got adopted. It took, she had one of these prolonged stories, but she ended up being adopted, and I saw her, and she lives with this woman who's great with her, but she's still so fearful that she likes the woman's husband as long as the woman's in the room. And the second she leaves the room, the Harmony is afraid of the husband. Yeah, that's weird. So some of these dogs, what you learn is that you've got to learn with their peculiarities, just like, with people. Yeah. Anything else? This is a pretty knowledgeable group for the most part, I would say. Who's involved with rescue here? Yeah, I thought we had a pretty big crowd.
San Jose Animal Care Center, Amy.
Pardon me?
San Jose Animal Care Center.
Yay! Well, so you guys, you know what it takes, and here's Rich Amazino is with us, and I was thinking about him today because as I write about, in the book, Rich is it. This is the man, right, behind the no-kill movement, and also always pushing us forward. And I was thinking a true sign of an optimist is not only somebody who believes that something can happen himself, but convinces other people that it can happen. And you just have to sort of be around Rich. You don't even, it's just coming off of him, like a mist. So everybody might want to stand near him before they leave. Anyhow, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the book, and keep up the fight. All right? Thank you.
We want to say thank you to Amy Sutherland for a wonderful reading. There were definitely a few wet eyes and some sniffles towards the end of her story about Walter Joe. We also want to say thank you to Leslie Cohen and the people at HarperCollins. And of course, we also want to say thank you to Sherry Franklin and Muttville Senior Dog Rescue. Finally, thanks to Cheryl McKeon and her team at Book Passage for holding a wonderful event. If you want to learn more about today's episode, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/106. Don't forget, you can win our signed copy of Rescuing Penny Jane. All you have to do is write a review on our iTunes or our Stitcher pages. Instructions will be in our show notes. The deadline is Sunday, March 12th at midnight Pacific time. So get those reviews in. We just want to say thank you for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. We're already at 106 episodes. We couldn't have gotten there without you. And remember, you spread a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.